Hello, sixth graders. Thank you for coming to watch this video. I will be going over the answers for Chapter 7's packet, Minnesota's Newcomers. So you can see here, question number 1, it says, listen to the answers I'm giving out loud. So for this packet right here. So Minnesota became a state. That happened in 1858. So 1858, it became a state. For the test, I expect you also to know the day. So May 11th, 1858. The Dakota and U.S. government signed the treaties of Traverse des Sioux and Mendota. That happened in 1851. So 1851 for the second one here. Minnesota became a territory in 1849. So a territory, 1849. Minnesota approved its constitution in 1857. So a reminder, the Constitution is the plan of government, and that happened in 1857. And European Americans outnumbered American Indians in Minnesota for the first time in 1855. So 1855 is when that happened. So going back here, question number 2, it says, how did Minnesota's population change in the 1850s? So let me be smarter than technology here. Apparently that. So American Indians, as they're opening up their land, or I should say losing their land through these treaties, that just opened it up for more and more settlers to move into Minnesota. So there was a rapid increase in population, particularly of European American residents. So soon as the question in question number 1, by 1855, settlers outnumbered American Indians by the middle of the decade. So when this question asked, how did Minnesota's population change in the 1850s? Basically, more settlers were in Minnesota than there were Native Americans. Question number 3 says, name 6 means of transportation used for travel to and within Minnesota in the 1850s. Here were those 6 modes of transportation. They had foot, canoe, steamboat, train, stagecoach, and ox cart. So those are the 6 ways they got around in the 1850s. So if you need more time to write these answers down, please pause the video. Question number 4 says, what were St. Paul, its citizens, and its first schoolhouse like when Harriet Bishop arrived? List 2 details about each. You might have something slightly different than these, but this is just the answers that I came up with. So describing what St. Paul was like, well, it had log huts were the homes, and the streets were bumpy and muddy. So it was really the beginning of a small town. And as more people would get there, move there, the town would change. The citizens of St. Paul, when Harriet Bishop arrived, the citizens were mostly men. There was a few hundred people, and about half of those people could read. And the schoolhouse where Harriet Bishop would set up her school was in an abandoned blacksmith shop. And there you'd find, you'd be in the middle of class and you could see rats running around in the corner or even have snakes slithering by you. Sounds like a fun place to go to school. In Minnesota and along in the United States government, both have 3 branches of the government. And when our country was founded, they wanted 3 branches. So one person did not have all the power. Like when we left Great Britain, the king had a lot of power. So they didn't want that. So they wanted 3 branches, and each branch having a different job, and each branch being equal in power. So going across the chart here, you can see it goes the branch, legislative, and 2 blanks, and then the role, so their job has a blank and then enforces laws and then another blank. So you had to fill in those missing spots. So the 3 branches in order, we have the legislative branch, the executive branch, and the judicial branch. So those 3 branches of government each have a different role. So the legislative branch, their job is to make laws. That's Congress. That's the House of Representatives and the Senate. They make laws. Then you have the executive branch led by the president. And the job of the executive branch is to enforce laws passed by Congress. Then you have the judicial branch, and the head of the judicial branch is the Supreme Court. Their job is to interpret laws. Has a law been broken? Can a law legally become a law? So those are the three branches of the United States government. So Minnesota wanted to become a territory, officially a part of the United States. And becoming a territory has some advantages. The territorial legislature could make laws for Minnesota. So that's something different. You can make your own laws. The territory sent a delegate to Congress, so somebody in Washington, D.C. to represent them. They couldn't vote on things, but they could be there to talk on behalf of Minnesota. Territories could create their own courts, and it was the first step to becoming a state. So if you wanted, before you could become a state, you had to become a territory. And question number 7, why did European American settlers start pouring into Minnesota around 1852? That happened, just like we learned in the last chapter with the Dakota, treaties and land cessions opened up American Indian land for settlement, and settlers seized the opportunity to farm their own land. So more treaties are being signed, especially in the northern part of Minnesota with the Ojibwe. So as more land is ceded, which means given up by the Native Americans, more settlers are pouring into Minnesota to settle that land. So that is number 7 there. So again, if you need more time, pause the video to write down these answers. Question number 8, how did the treaties of 1854 and 1855 impact the Ojibwe of northern Minnesota? So as more treaties are being signed, especially with the Ojibwe, land in northern Minnesota that belonged to the Ojibwe were ceded to the U.S. government. The Ojibwe negotiated for annuities and reservations. Just like we learned last chapter with the annuities, so that's that payment of food and money every year the government would give to the Ojibwe, and the Ojibwe are also given reservations to live on, so land that they could keep. Question number 9, what problems did Hans Matson face during his first winter, and how did he solve them? So that first winter, Hans Matson and his family and other settlers faced a lot of problems, such as freezing weather, lack of supplies at home, and even lack of supplies in Red Wing, the nearby town. To overcome those, Matson built a log cabin with his family. He purchased all the supplies they could to make it through winter. So any chance he could he had to buy supplies, he did it. And when supplies finally arrived on steamboats in April, he went and bought more. So he restocked with supplies that he bought in Red Wing. So a tough first winter for Hans Matson and his family. Number 10, what were some reasons that people immigrated from Europe? So this term immigrated, starting with an E, means why did they leave? So they exited. So when you immigrate with an E, it means you're leaving. So from Europe, why did these people leave Europe? And these people left Europe for several reasons. They left Europe because of famine. So food shortage, especially in Ireland, where they depended a lot on potatoes. The disease had gone through and wiped out the potato crop. So starvation was a problem. So people left Europe because of that. People left Europe to escape war. They left Europe because there was a lack of jobs. So not a lot of jobs. So they hoped to come over to the United States to find work. Lack of land. They knew there was a lot of land available in the States, so they wanted to come over here. And a lot left just in search of a better life to improve their living conditions. Question 11, what were the advantages of becoming a state? So if a territory wants to become a state, what are the advantages? Why would they want to become a state? Well, you could control your own finances and budgets. So you can decide, what are we going to have people paying taxes? What can you spend that money on? Things like that. A state is more independent than a territory, has the power to make more decisions. Where a territory, a lot of the things are done by Congress. But when you're a state, you can do a lot more things on your own. A state can deal with private companies, whether it is such as railroads, where you can control where the railroads go. And a state has a bigger voice in Congress and in the nation. So now when you become a state, you have 2 senators in the U.S. Senate. You also have representatives in the U.S. House of Representatives. So you have a lot more say in the federal government, so the government that runs the country. Number 12. So before you become a state, you have to have a constitution. You have to create a plan for how your state government is going to run. So the constitution they created in Minnesota created 3 things. So the 3 things established by the Minnesota Constitution was, it set the state's boundaries. So now they have the border. There's a lot of disagreement about what the state should look like, but finally they settled on what our state looks like today. So it set the boundaries. The state constitution also granted the right to vote to free white male citizens. So they said who could vote in the state, and it divided state powers among the three branches. So that's different. When Minnesota was a territory, it had the lower house and the upper house. But now when Minnesota became a state, it went with the three branches: the executive branch, judicial branch, and legislative branch. So those are the three things created by the state constitution. Question 13. Federalism is a system of government where power is divided between two levels of government. Name the two levels? So the government in our country, we operate under the idea of federalism, which means there are two levels of government. We have the federal level. The federal level controls the entire country. Then you have state governments, where each state has a government that runs the state. So we have 50 of those state governments. So that's the two levels of government in our country. Federal runs the entire country. State runs that specific state. So question on page 44 here. This is something we did a couple weeks ago. Make sure you are answering questions 1 through 5 is what you had to do this one. I'm not going to give the answers here. This is just one I'll check. As long as you read these carefully and did what they told you, you should be fine. If you have any questions about anything I went over today, please send me an email. Other than that, thanks for watching and have a good rest of your day. Bye.